at this NGI Talk. I'm Jorge from the NGI Outreach Office, and today we have two speakers whose careers in NGI, I believe, need no introduction. For this reason, I will simply inform you that the session will be recorded, okay? And without further delay, I hope you enjoy this activity with Mr. Rob van Kranenburg and Mr. Mirko. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jorge. So welcome, everyone. I'm very happy that we'll be having a conversation with Mirko, who is and was involved in so many NGI activities, and we'll be going back to the roots of it, to our first CSA, which was called NGI MOVE. Before I do that, I want to go back a little bit earlier to a program in the mid-90s, which was called The Disappearing Computer. It was a project by Future and Emerging Technologies, iCube, and it was built around the notion of what was then called ambient intelligence and things that think. So it was before the term the Internet of Things, which was around in 1999, 2000. That was a program in which designers, engineers, real-world activities like schools, ethnographers worked together, and I was very pleased to be part of one of their sessions in Jönköping in 2000, where I saw this whole ecosystem of engineers, ethnographers, designers, scientists from social scientists working together. And that to me always was kind of an amazing program that we wanted to be replicated. And unfortunately, in 2000, this stopped. And what happened was that there was a particular group of people going into situated and autonomous computing, and another group going into interaction design. And they basically never came together. So these groups grew apart. So when I heard around 2015, 14, 15, 16, that a new program was going to be opened, I was extremely excited, and I went to Brussels to talk to Peter Vertelnik, who was then one of the key persons involved in building next generation internet. And as we spoke, I asked him what the idea was of the Commission with this new program, this next generation internet. And he basically said the same words that were spoken and that was happening in 2000, was to bridge again the engineers with the scientists and the social scientists, with the interaction designers and the designers, with the ethnographers, and the ethnographers with the people doing the actual work on the ground, the real industry, and building the industrial applications. So I was very excited, and I told him we had some big plans, some big ideas, and he said that NGI was all about these big ideas. It was all about building these new frameworks for Europe. That was sort of in between the visions that were happening then, and these visions were on one hand the kind of more like a Chinese vision, which was about more control, and an American vision, which was more about the market. And sort of building NGI in between was kind of the plan, and that was when I think we started Mirko with that in mind, with the idea that there would be new ways of looking at things in Europe.
Yeah, exactly. So Rob, I mean, you got a good introduction there. Rob, we've been around for a while, doing projects also in other sort of areas and sectors. So I think the trigger was when you came and said, let's do a project in this NGI, and I didn't have that overview as you did with the aspects. So it's always good to work with you, Rob, because you always have a vision. Whereas I'll just get on board with it and try and drive it in one way or another forward as well. But when you came to me in late 2016 it was, and said the commission is starting this new program, the NGI. We're trying to bridge the socioeconomic sphere with the engineering sphere and the computer science sphere. It sounded, of course, interesting. And previously we had the program called the FIPPP, or FIware as it came out then. So there was, of course, a little bit of skepticism because that was very industry driven. Now, what's different now? And this is what we actually set out to do in the early stages of the NGI. It was actually that pathfinding to figure out what made sense in this context, right?
Yes, definitely. And I think, let me share my screen from if I can start sharing. So I guess you see my screen now, sort of this.
Yes.
Yes. So basically, what we did with NGI MOVE was basically touring Europe like crazy. We set about 80 salons and co-creation workshops, and we reached about 5,000 people in that. And what we basically aimed to do was to rethink the internet assumed functioning in terms of technology, governance, sustainability, values, and citizens' agency, and debating existing and desirable alternatives. And so we held discussions with policymakers, engineers, artists, researchers, startups, investors, cryptographers, students, and to name basically but a few. And in terms of visions, it was clear that for us at that time, we needed to work on infrastructures and visions of society in order to create a common ground for action. At that point, we wrote that we do not lack the technological means. What we lack is coordinated approach balancing regulations, experiments, and citizens' engagement. And this also was one of the side effects, or let's say one of the main intended goals of NGI, of Next Generation Internet from the Commission point of view, was to organize the individuals, to basically build an ecology of the small. And this was happening a lot through open calls and cascading funding. It made us also joke at some point that the hackers were being hacked by the EU admin in the Commission, basically. So organizing alone actors, individual actors, people who are working together with 2 people or 3 people, and have always done this without money or funds or ideas, all of a sudden were targeted by programs in which they could take part. But the price for that was to be organized. It was a kind of organization. So that was one of the main effects of building NGI, was building this ecology of the small. In that sense. So for us, it meant that basically it was not lacking this technological means. It was lacking a coordinating approach, building regulation experiments and citizens engagement. That was really the key of that moment. I'll stop sharing now. So for the moment.
I'll share the non-writer version of that, Rob, if you don't mind. You can see,
Yeah.
that you're a writer. You can see in your slides, it's only text. Now, so I think what was so immensely interesting. So this is actually the picture that I took after we submitted the proposal. So at the time that we looked at it, the NGI existed as a work program by the European Commission with a call, I think, for 3 different coordination support actions. And at the same time, there was also the NGI study was running, which was based on a tender, I think, or a contract. And this was a concerted effort from the Commission to say, okay, we need a plan. And we submitted this in April, not 2027. That should be 2017. I'm in the future already, but I'm still wearing the same shirt after 7 years. The beard's gotten longer though. But I think what came out of that was really that we had an opportunity to create a plan around it. And you mentioned it already. We had 80 salons. These projects that we ran, the CSAs, the coordination support actions that created this pathfinding, they were 18-month projects. So they were very short projects. They weren't, there was a decent amount of funding in that 18 months. But if you consider 80 events in 18 months, that's about 1 event per week. We were in one place or another trying to create a dialogue around what we needed, what was required to create a program that bridged the ideas between centralization, decentralization, that bridged the idea between full control from a state versus full control from large software companies, and paving the way for a European value-driven program supporting internet development. And that I think when we wrote the proposal, I thought that you were over ambitious, Rob. I thought it was insane to do so many things in such a short time. But one of the parts that I remember really well when we talked to or when we heard the program description and so on was, hit the ground running. So usually when we have EU projects, you have a period of 1, 2, 3 months where you're trying to figure out what you're going to do, and you have a lot of this debate. We had a plan, right? So there was 2 pages in the proposal where we said, in the first week that we start the project, we are going to be at this event. So we hit the ground running. We hit the ground running, and what also helped was that we actually knew some of the people around us also with the other CSAs. So we of course knew Monique, who was on the call as well, and we knew Jim, who had another CSA, and the others we got to know quite quickly as well. So it was also helpful to have that context of a community already existing from somewhere, and working together. But it was ambitious. It was crazy to have 1 event per week, and it wasn't just locally or online. This was still packing your bags, traveling somewhere, checking into some sort of accommodation, and presenting in front of a crowd of people, right?
Yes, absolutely. And it was also this kind of enthusiasm that drove the very good coordination between the first projects that were that you mentioned with Jim and Monique. So there was very good collaboration going on there, because everybody knew that this was something new, that this was something that could basically be shaped in a particular way that we wanted to.
Yeah. Do you remember our team?
Yes.
Yeah, I have a picture from that as well. I'll just skip back and forth between things, if you allow me. So here we go. There's Rob's in the shadow. I'm in the limelight, but a little bit on the sideline because they didn't let me in. No, it was a really excellent team. Marta here on the left. Then we had Manfred. Manfred came actually into our consortium because we knew him as a reviewer beforehand, and he was a tough man. He read every single thing that we wrote and criticized us for it. So we thought we're gonna have him on our side. And he's a security specialist, but he came in as a dissemination expert for the project, and was extremely good at actually creating the first initial brand of NGI, and also helping us with creating sort of good messages. And he had 2 colleagues that worked with him that helped us through some projects. And then we had, now I've forgotten the names. Do you remember, Rob?
Luria.
Yes, from Mobile World Congress, Barcelona.
Yeah,
exactly.
Very
4 years from
important
now.
to have 4 years from now inside the project. So we were very lucky to have this trade event, which is running in Barcelona, inside of the project. So they were helping us not from the outside but from the inside.
And I think so. At the beginning, there was actually this very strong duality of saying, on one side, we want to support the traditional way of looking at startups and generating internet and web startups, and then also supporting the activism and the open source communities. And I think slowly over time, if we're looking, a little bit ahead now, how the program has evolved, we evolved into more and more of a world where we're trying to look at the digital activism as actually entrepreneurship, and not following, the 365 days to $1 billion model that we can see maybe in the US on the startup side, but sustainable startups with a transparent and open approach towards building technology, with a focus on European values, privacy. And that's something that, when we set out with NGI MOVE, I didn't know that. I just always looked at this duality and couldn't really quite understand how to combine that.
Yeah. I think this goes back to this building this ecology of the small. It was really a deliberate act to try to organize individuals. So NGI was really about organizing individuals, because I think the people also behind it realized that there was a lot of open source development going on between, and this was happening with 1 person, 2 persons, 3 persons, people working in a very unconventional and way, in a very unorganized way. And so there was something was needed to try to organize these individuals and these small groups into, let's say, actionable ways of addressing them. And one of the ways to do that was with open calls and cascading funding, and try to actually get them to subscribe to these ways. And of course, in doing that, they were also buying into the same administrative and kind of legislative procedures that they were always worried about or working against. So it was kind of a tension there. And I think what is one is as we look at NGI now, is definitely the organization of this ecology of the small that is so important.
Well, what strikes me on the coming back to the 4 years from now was when I first went to 4 years from now, which is this event that used to run or still runs alongside the Mobile World Congress for the startup community. I felt it was exactly this. It was a lot of small actors exhibiting themselves and trying to find, a more tribal approach towards offering, their values into a bigger community. And what struck me actually is that when I then a few years later went for the first time for FOSDEM in Brussels, the free open source and democratization event that is organized in Europe every February in Brussels. There's to some degree, of course, there's more organization around in 4 years from now. It's more corporate and more towards the traditional means of innovation and startups. But FOSDEM has many of these elements too. It's just a lot more chaotic, maybe, because it's not on the same organized grounds in that way. But there's a lot of similarities in the communities. And what surprised me actually when I look back at it, there was overlap. So when we went to 4 years from now, I met, for instance, CryptPad. I don't know if you can see this sticker here. CryptPad, XWiki. And they're, of course, also heavily present at FOSDEM. And there were other actors that had this overlap, which actually showed that there was already some seeds that we can build our ideas on and try to start looking at how these two communities or how these different approaches could start being aligned and move forward in some way or another. And now, now that we know which types of organizations mainly fund, it's of course more on the activism side, but we still ask, what's the sustainability? What will you do once this part of the funding runs out? How will you sustain your open source project? Will you fall back into being able just to work on it whenever you can, or have you maybe an interest in working on it more sustainably? So as an example, at the last FOSDEM, just to carry that thought onwards, there was an extremely interesting talk by Ryan Sipes from Thunderbird. Now, Thunderbird is a well-known email client that's used by millions of users. But in the last 6-7 years, they went using donations from a few 100,000 euros to now almost 10 million euros in donations, creating a really economic, sustainable platform for Thunderbird to be developed for the community. So there's a lot of that's a lot that has happened, I think, and a lot of awareness that is being created in this context too.
Yeah. I remember we went to FOSDEM with an NGI event with Marietje Schaake, who was then also there and who talked about NGI and about the possibilities for that for the FOSDEM crowd, which was the crowd was very skeptical at first, but they've moved on to yes, absolutely, yeah.
I think one of the really lucky things that happened was that that NLnet got involved. The foundation in the Netherlands that is already supporting open source communities and projects very heavily. They were involved and they popped up right at the first time that we met as coordinators when we created the coordination support actions in the NGI, running the NGI study. And they had this report of what we need to do in Europe to fix the internet. They had this list of tasks. And it was really good. Yeah. I really liked that. And this was the first time I met Michiel. But you know Michiel for a longer time, right?
Yes, I know Michiel Leenaars for a long time.
He was your student, you told me.
Yes, he was my student, yes. He studied two things. He studied physics and language and literature. And I was then in the language and literature staff of the Tilburg University where we met. So Michiel is one of a kind. Is a unique brain figure. He's amazing, and indeed it was, I think, part of also of his work ethics and enthusiasm that made that all happen. That NLnet is running so amazing and so smoothly. But this is mainly constantly able to find new open source gems to really be part of that ecosystem. And fully agree with you. I remember also that report that I think at that point Michiel was trying to fix the internet from the ground up, which was one thing that we were trying to do, but we couldn't do it at one go. He was a bit disappointed that we couldn't do it at one go at that time, but yes, he felt back on it. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think so. There's actually so the amazing thing was that Michael that he opened an awful lot of doors for us. So he opened, for instance, the door for FOSDEM. You know, now NLNet is running a lot of the activities there, also, you know, connected to the NGI, which helps us a lot to connect to a wider community. And then, you know, there are all these subgroups that either NLNet or some of the other projects have supported that also have like this niche context or this element that they are situated in this or other events in Europe. There's also the OW2Con, for instance, that's organized by OW2 in France and Paris every year. You have Doors Kluk, which is an event that a small Linux community event in Zagreb every year. There are all these small events that are, you know, that are seemingly disconnected, but somehow also still have this overlap in meeting. For instance, at FOSDEM. And we actually had a lot of success connecting into this community. So I'm an outsider, I have to admit that, and I had to learn to appreciate it and be there and connect it. And now I really enjoy it. But what I remember is I was there for the first time in 2020, so I'm a fair newbie to FOSDEM. And I went to the large lecture theater, Jensen it's called, for the opening. And I don't know how many it seats. I think it seats like 3,500, 4,000 people.
Yeah,
it's huge. A lot of
people.
And it was Thorsten Lehmhus who did the keynote. And he was talking about, you know, the story about the Linux kernel and the open source community development and all the things that they want to do. It was like a shopping list. So at that point in time, I actually had my first NGI Cascade funding project, NGI Pointer, which is a whole other story as well to tell in respect to Michael and NLNet as well. But I was there and I was ready to recruit the first people to do projects. So after Thorsten's talk, I came up to him and said, I stood in the queue of 4 or 5 people wanting to talk to him, and most of them congratulated him to this great talk and had a little chat about Linux. And I just went and said, Thorsten, do you want some money? I didn't know how to approach it, you know, and we had democratic processes to, of course, hand out the money. So I couldn't just give him some money, but I said, you know, I think it would be great if you could apply, you know, or at least know some people that could do. And he said, yeah, I know. And we talked a little bit, and he eventually actually applied for, it was, you know, a small amount of money in the call as an individual to build a Linux kernel regression tracker, and it was a pretty cool small project. And he worked together with a few people to make it, and it's still in use today, I think. So it was some very interesting stuff.
Yeah, so there's a direct bridge between NGI and NLNet and Pointer, as you mentioned now. Sort of. So can you tell a little bit about your experiences in Pointer, and how do you feel that what came out of that was, or some of the things that coming out of that came out of that are important in your mind?
So I think first of all, we need to connect it back to MOVE. So when MOVE finished, we had the NGI Awards. And in the NGI Awards, we had 9 winners. It was like this weird, large portfolio of categories. And there were some interesting people there that I met through this. So one of the prizes that we gave out was actually a half-year visiting professorship or academic researcher position at my department. And that went to Christopher Frauenberger. And through him, I met then some other people as well that were interesting, that helped me also figure out some ideas that we could follow up then in Pointer. But we also gave the prize, for instance, to CryptPad, so Ludwig de Borst, who's trying to have this online platform that offers online sharing of documents and online collaboration on documents. And so there were already these types of projects that were interesting in the awards and the type of people interesting in the awards. And then I had a meeting with some people from Funding Box who specialize in this open core processes, and they said we would like to bid for an NGI Cascade funding project because this is what their business is. And I said, sure, I'm interested in the NGI, I can help with that, but I need to find my angle as a researcher. What would I do? In NGI MOVE, I was interested in seeing what the community has to say and engage with the community, but I don't manage money. That's not my role. But the angle that I looked at is I was thinking, okay, I can look at the sustainability from a business perspective on open source projects. That was on my angle. And I said, I'll do that. I'll study that in the project. So I was a beneficiary or partner in the proposal, and we submitted it. And what happened there was that I think there was still the duality of, should it be a startup program, an accelerator, or should it be like this community connecting, open source, supporting digital commons context of projects? And Funding Box, of course, submitted it as an accelerator and won it because that was still, because the duality was there. But it was already pushing towards maybe a more community approach. So we shifted the project then, once it was accepted, towards more of a community approach because it was targeting renovating internet architectures. So it really had very little traditional startup accelerator context, but it had a lot of open source community context instead around this. And so when we started the project, we had to rewrite a lot and rewrite the approach to the project. And what we also took into consideration straight away, and this is what I learned also from Michael, was look out for the projects. You will often have a project context that hasn't dealt with the commission, the red tape, the bureaucracy. Maybe there's a lot of mistrust as well. And I took this information on board, I hope well enough, and I think Pointer was successful, so I think it was well enough. But then also Michael helped us. He said, okay, we're gonna send you people, to your open calls, and make sure that you have a good cohort of projects to evaluate and then onboard if we can. And I'll show you the result of it now. So this is just the entire point why we're doing these projects is, of course, to do stickers. And this is the list of stickers or projects that we supported in NGI Pointer. And, if we just look at a few of them that are interesting. So Scuttlebutt was a really interesting project that was driven by Zenna at the time. And Zenna is actually now a student at my department as well, doing a master's degree in IT and communications, and hopefully also stays on for a PhD with us. So that's going to be, that was really successful from our side, or interesting. We supported 2 projects under the Scion umbrella, so Pan API and Verified Scion. So more like layer 2 and Verified Scion, more like layer 2 internet architecture context. We had a few projects on multipath TCP that were interesting. We had some projects on congestion control, some congestion experience, for example, that competed on standardization, but unfortunately lost out, although I think they keep fighting. We had projects that supported EDA tools. We had also a project with LibreSoc that was there with some interesting people as well. So we had a really nice portfolio of different types of projects that we supported, also browser and an email client based in JMap as an example. Taylor was there as well, which also grew into a fantastic project now and also has its own large-scale project or larger project with the Commission. So you collect this portfolio of very diverse types of projects that each one has some interesting story to tell by themselves. So we also try to make a podcast together with Mirko on many of the projects that you can find on Acast. Yeah, so without NLNet support and without the branding support from, for instance, the outreach office that was run by Martel and Monique, and without, other examples that were running alongside the NGI Pointer would have probably not been such a success, in my opinion. So, for the first time, I started seeing a program that was developed by the Commission together with other people, and enabled by these pathfinding projects that we had originally, and built on then grassroots projects like the ones that I just showed you, into something that is actually coherent. It has a coherent message, it has a coherent visual appearance, it has these stickers that everybody knows. I have them also on my book here, a lot of the new ones that I now have in a new project, NGI Search. All of the small pieces that, individuals working on a smaller projects are suddenly sitting together and actually have the ability to talk to others that go through the same pain or success story or failures and have a context to discuss. I think it's amazing. It's the first time I'm really experiencing that.
Yeah. And I guess this was basically the point of NGI was, and the point of NGI MOVE, and the point of the whole Next Generation Internet project, that this was what the Commission was trying to achieve, to build this ecology of the small, to build this ecology of individuals that there were sort of then in this kind of range of keeping their idiosyncrasy sort of intact, because it's not as if a lot of these individuals are easy individuals. Let's say there's a lot of and at the same time having this kind of level of coordination that is light but still workable and working.
Yeah. There's I think one nugget we skipped, well, two nuggets. One nugget is, we actually made a book. Now you can't see it so well because I'm using a filter, but there's a book that we created for after NGI MOVE was done. Marta was editing and writing it. She actually interviewed a lot of people, and I read it the other day again before we prepared for this conversation as well. It's very relevant. The PDF is also online on the NGI.eu as one of the resources. But the other nugget is maybe something more funny to talk about. Do you remember NGI.eu, the domain name, how that came about? So I remember we had a big discussion about if it should be called NGI or not, because NGI was also, so the Next Generation Internet was also an American initiative for a while for, faster broadband, I think. So it had something tainted, but it actually stuck. NGI sort of stuck. So we couldn't do anything about it. So we were looking for, the main website for the NGI. And it was Manfred, and I don't even know if I'm allowed to say this or not, but we bought Manfred bought the three-letter domain NGI.eu via an Austrian broker from some very dubious people via a cash transaction. I think it was several thousand euros. But now I think it's the domain name is, I think, transferred somewhere else, and now of course it's used by Mattel to host the NGI.eu or the NGI activities, and so there's also some some story that we'll remember.
Yes, definitely. Can you see my screen now? Putting on the book.
No, I don't see the screen. It's still on the banner.
Oh, let me try to. Can you see it?
No, we can't see the screen. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Well,
oh.
No.
Probably
but we also
try
lost
now.
your.
Okay, but I'll try later.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think we can see your screen now, Rob.
Okay.
You're
So
sharing your.
Here's the book.
Yeah. And I think you can still download it from NGI.eu, as far as I remember as well.
Okay. Yeah, so we had the interviews with Marta, who was doing them, and then we basically had this towards the collective intelligence for Europe, new ecology as kind of a conclusion.
Yeah. No, it was really good, because I think it also showed kind of the input that we had from the various people that we talked to during the salons and the workshops that we were doing. It was a good summary of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think there was just a request for a direct link. I just found that link and I posted into the message here. This one is a direct link to the book.
Perfect.
So, but what is interesting about the interviews that we had then, and I saw Manon, Manon was listed there as one of the interviewees.
Yeah.
So Manon, correct me if I'm wrong, she works for the Dutch police?
Yes, the police innovation.
Yeah, that was police innovation, that's right. And they had actually a blockchain system for people that had problems paying their rent, as far as I remember. It was like, so if you needed to get support to pay for your rental services, you needed to go through an entirely new process or long process that would take longer than actually you having the time to pay your rent, so you would never get the money. So they had this blockchain project that looked at the various stakeholders of verifying that you were actually eligible and that you were you for that rent payout. And I think, the application doesn't really matter so much. It was a good social context, of course. But what was interesting is that, in the NGI lifetime, we have had several waves of technology to which a large juggernaut as the funding agency of the EC is not able to react to in a meaningful way. The work program at the EC level take, 4 or 5, maybe 6 or 7 years even to react to rewriting work programs in a meaningful way, going through the processes and procedures, which are also very important in a democratic process. But when something new comes along, like for instance, at that point in time, there was also blockchain, a very hot topic. And then the other topic that now, of course, has completely overtaken a lot of the NGI projects and directions of projects as well is in the context of search is our large language models and multi-language models. And of course, there's now a project that looks at the infrastructure on this through the Open Web Search, so an Open Web Index. OpenWebSearch.eu is a project. It demonstrates also how a program like the NGI can be extremely reactive to externalities of technology suddenly emerging on the market as usable, mature technologies, seemingly usable, mature technologies that can move into real applications and services, either providing a context of a world that mirrors European values or actually tries to move away from this. So, we are now in this problem again that, should we be using and supporting OpenAI, ChatGPT, or should we not do this? We definitely know that we need alternatives. And the projects, for example, that I'm now supporting in NGI Search are really providing that alternative. So we have on the call, we have, for example, Alessandro Bruno, who's working on a project that looks at checking of fake information in healthcare-related topics. But we have many other projects in NGI Search that look at fact-checking in particular, also internal workings of algorithms, so algorithm checking and verification, like AI forensics is doing that. In particular, in the context of the elections that are coming up now, is also an interesting topic to investigate. How, for instance, search results are maybe biased, or what types of videos or images we are now being provided with in news articles regarding elections. This seems to be a huge topic now in the US as well. So it's an interesting time, and we show reactivity on this in the program as well.
Yeah. That's so basically that's what you're saying. The NGI shows reactivity. It shows it closes this gap between the huge work programs and actually trying to react to something that's going on. You said that in Pointer you were looking basically at the sustainability of open source projects, and do you also have some kind of overarching goal in search for this?
So I need to have a personal interest in this. So I'm working at the university, so I need to have a research angle on everything that I do in one way or another. And the research angle that I have on the NGI is, how do open source projects organize and sustain themselves? These are the two research directions that I'm interested in. So I use NGI as a data source, you could say. And each project for me is a data source that I can talk to and have access to, and actually get a lot of deeper insights into, and form an understanding of it. So I have a colleague, Rita, she's a PhD student. She works on organizing an organization around open source projects. So how, for example, projects like Scuttlebutt, they're extremely decentralized, how they are forming around funding opportunities or problems, and solving this, and then moving on, dispersing again, and doing something else, and then emerging again. So these are really the interests that I have, and this pervades across NGI Pointer, which was more on internet architecture, and now NGI Search, which is search, discovery, and indexing. And there are many similarities that we see, because we are surrounded mainly by these types of projects that don't usually get funding. So it's not like you are a project that would normally get funding from a research council because you're a research project, or you would get funding from an investor because you have a specific business plan. But you're a project that is working towards the digital commons. You're trying to create something for the broader community through engaging with the community that is usable by everybody. And it's usually done in the open, so you're not hiding anything, you're not keeping any secrets. So sometimes these projects are so specialized that they have that as the edge. So if you look at, for instance, Scion, an entirely open source, an open project with 70, 80 collaborators in the research domain. So we could say it's a research project. But they also have a business alongside this, which is called Anapaya, that is actually offering this, advice around the development of the software, the implementation and deployment of it, but also helping with the integration with the Scion architecture with, for instance, ISPs or end users. So, making the changes there as well. So you can actually create interesting business opportunities around this as well through, either software as a service, hosted software, or, freemium premium versions. You can look at it from a consulting perspective. So you say second generation consulting services based on the learnings that you have. So maybe you program in a more obscure programming language like OCaml and so on. So these are all very interesting pieces of information that we'd like to look at more deeply, and also hopefully provide some interesting insights on that as well.
Yeah. And is there a lot of AI related activity going on at the moment in search with deepfake, so for example, or?
Yeah, I would like to show another slide, I think. I'll just need to find the slide. 1 second. So this, you can see my slide now, right? Yeah. So this is now NGI search status here in March. So we just, before this call, I just walked out of the open call for first round of evaluation. So we have about 120 applicants. So this is the largest number of applicants that we had for open call. So we had 3 already, and we have 1 more coming up in April, May. But if you look at the list of projects that we're having here, so in particular, if you're looking for the second and third open call, and you can see it also in the name.
At the moment, can you share it? Because we don't see it appearing.
Okay. Oh, I need to press allow. There we go. Now I should be able to see it, right? Yeah.
Yes, we see it.
So yeah. So what I said, the open call for, we just closed that, and we were just talking about the proposals that came in. It's about 120, and before we move them on to external evaluators, we go through it and trying to look at that they're within scope, that they are all open source focused, and that they have a good credibility before we pass it on to external evaluations. And again, there we see a lot of large language model projects. And if you look at some of the names that you can see of the projects that we're already funding, and you can find that on NGI.eu, you can find the projects. A lot of them have to do with large language models. So here I find me, Alessandro is in the call. He has a large language model project. Alma is a large language model project. Waze is large language models. Thesis is knowledge graphs and large language models. Verify AI, Science Checker. Chat Eurolex is like a chatbot for legal texts. Then we have OKLLM, AALLM. They're all large language models as well. So there's a lot of projects that are trying to do something in this context of either detecting information that has bias or is fake information, or looking at hallucinations in large language models, or trying to wrap that into a service to offer some sort of digital commons service on specialized niche topics. Some are more research focused, some are more service focused, but they all have some sort of element that uses new technology to figure out what we're doing. So Waze and, for instance, Alma, for instance, they are looking at open source large language models and trying to figure out which ones would be most or best integrated into different projects. So I think maybe in the call we have somebody from the E Foundation that is behind Alma, by the way, looking at integrating a large language model into the E Foundation-based phones. But we also have, again, other projects that are looking more strangely at search and discovery. That we have, for instance, Spare Course that looks at mechanisms if you need computing power and storage. How you best find that in your ecosystems, or creating these shortcuts to ecosystems to find that. Or Cyan, again, looking at layer 2 technology, but then from a browser's perspective as a plugin to enable Cyan for path detection. So this is more on the lower layers on discovery, for example. And we also have some projects that are relating into more the STARTS community, so the science, technology, and the arts community, which we're very happy with. So we have something on MetaVision and EVA, which are more related towards combining sort of the metaverse and search, visual search, and visualization of results in some way or another. So we're trying also different things and seeing how they fit into the community as well. Not just, one direction saying we only look at protocols and algorithms, but also at, different types of applications and how the technology can be used. So overall, always an interesting portfolio and interesting mechanism around it.
Yeah. Again, I think I would say that the way that we started the conversation by saying that one of the side effects or one of the main effects of the Commission organizing something like Next Generation Internet was to enable individuals to be part of systems that normally only companies or big companies or large industry or industry labs could be part of. I think is vindicated by what you just show, is that a lot of the people there would never ever be able to get funding in some way if it wasn't for something like NGI trying to organize this ecology of the small, as I say, sort of.
Yeah. I think some people are leaving now. So Lois from NGI Taylor is leaving now. So NGI Taylor is actually something that's also really amazing. That's happening there. And just to give people also the opportunity, Rob, to look at the projects that I just presented. I put a link in there, and you can find the
Great.
3 first open calls, and then also links to the projects with a short audio explanation of what they're doing attached there as well. But I mean, I want to make sure, I'm a small drop in the big stone here, on the big stone. So there's many other projects like NGI Search and NGI Pointer around, in particular, the suite of NGI Zeros, and now also the large NGI Zero Commons fund that is managed by NLNet, and then also our colleagues from other organizations that also manage these projects. These are just some examples from them, and there are many others around there as well. And now I can see also Maggie is there. Maggie is a project manager for Open Web Search .eu, which is creating an open web index. Another piece of the infrastructure that you have that could create what I think in NGI MOVE, when we're going back to this, was actually saying we are putting infrastructure components into place that create this 500 million people Eurozone version of an internet. It's not a splinter net or a separate internet that runs on different protocols, but it runs on different values. So how do you access? What do you access? What alternatives do you have to, for instance, using Google? Or using a video conferencing platform like BBB instead of using Zoom or Google Meet or Microsoft Teams. And Maggie also just mentioned that.
Yeah. So do you think that maybe specifically more hardware-oriented projects could be interested for some kind of next round?
I think I have a little bit of a challenge. So I thought about it the other day, in particular now looking at open calls for NGI Search. So I think there are many opportunities going many different directions. I think hardware is one that could be very interesting. I think what would be also very interesting is to start involving other communities again, like for instance the STARTS community. I think is very interesting to get some more input again from non-technologists, maybe from people whose brains are wired differently than an engineer's brain. I mean, I have an engineer's brain, and it's not good. it's not a good brain. It's a really good brain when there's problems in front of you. But if you only ever use the same hammer to fix that problem, you also get an issue. And so we need to have that input from other communities as well. I liked some of the ideas that came from hardware. So we provided funding for a project which is called Carusa, which was looking at optical communication in, for instance, cities to support, more private communication networks. And they had some really interesting technologies that we played with. LibreSoc, LibreEDA, there are two projects that are more hardware oriented, but of course make software, but for chips and chip design. Those were interesting projects because, you need to look at, I think, more these types of key technologies that are governed by either nation states or large software or hardware companies. So if we're looking at NVIDIA, for example, how they are dominating now the space on the AI side, running something on their chips is very important. We're creating these dependencies and also creating these monstrously large organizations that can dominate a space and monopolize it even, that I think are dangerous. And we need alternatives. And I think Moreno is doing this for mobile phones as an example. That's the E-Foundation is doing a fantastic job in that direction. So it's very interesting. And I remember sitting also in a meeting a long time ago with a commission where I think Pedro Malo said, we need to have a European mobile phone company after Nokia went, the wrong way. And now we have some interesting ones that, are also European based, but of course not competing anywhere near the Samsung and Apple worlds, but we at least offering alternatives to these key areas. And I think hardware, in particular the chip sides, is a very important one. And also looking at supply chains, securing supply chains around that is also an interesting topic. And for that, we need to have activities that are already existing, supporting them, and creating awareness that these alternatives actually exist as well, giving them a chance to exist.
Are you looking a little bit in that direction now, or for the coming year, let's say, or do you have your mind on a specific issue at the moment?
Yeah. So what I met a bunch of very interesting people in Paris at the OW2Con, and one of them was Philippe Obradon. He's co-founder of SPDX and Cyclone DX he's working with, and some other things. So it's this SBOM, this software bill of materials that everybody starts talking about after the presidential. The US president's directive or whatever it was called, order or something, the ominous name of something. And I work in an organization where we talk about bill of materials in terms of manufacturing quite a bit. From a research perspective, supply chains are interesting. I never really thought about the software supply chain that much. But then I was invited to be part of a panel at the NGI Forum in Brussels a few months ago in the autumn, where we talked about the risks and critical elements of securing the software supply chain in this open source context. And there, Clément pointed out a blog post from Thomas de Pierre, which was called "I'm Not a Supplier." And I met then Thomas de Pierre by coincidence at the policy session at FOSDEM, and I just said, I'm so happy that you published that post. And he said, it was just a rant, it was a 15-minute or half an hour write-up after he was angry about something over Christmas. But it states at the very bottom of it about open source software, it quotes a license that it's, the software is as is, you take it, there are no warranties, there are no guarantees, you take it and you take it as it is. So when somebody comes and takes a piece of open source software, integrates into their software stack, and then expects it to be maintained and worked with, that's untrue. So he likens the whole situation with that somebody that somebody who does this is more like a raccoon dumpster diving, looking for free stuff, than actually entering into an agreement of a supply chain. And I think this comes back to my interest in sustainability and organizing around open source projects, which is we shouldn't put the same yardstick on these types of projects without understanding them that we do for, you know, contractual obligations in a traditional engineering industry context, where you have server level agreements, where you make contracts and payments, because often the person that creates the piece of open source software that is so prolifically used then in the community isn't paid for their work. And they didn't expect it in the first place to be paid, but they also don't expect that somebody knocks on their door and says, well, why did you fix that problem? Now, you know, our entire economy is crashing because something isn't working. Yeah. And we've seen it in, you know, Faker.js, Color.js, you know, Log4j, LeftPad is another example. So there have been lots of interesting sort of cases in the open source community that has provided something, but then, you know, something else went wrong for various reasons. And then we blame people, you know, you know, we can go back to Aaron Schwartz, you know, we blamed him. We blamed Malak, wasn't it? The Color and Faker.js, you know, he was made out to be a bad person, you know, for corrupting his code, but he was just fed up. It was his work. And he was banned from GitHub, and then his code was reinstated to a previous version, and then the world was fine again, you know? So I think there are interesting things to study and interesting things to look at from that perspective. But when it comes towards funding, we just need to keep finding people that then trust the organization, that they have some opportunity here to do something good. What I'm more interested in is maybe to shift from the continuous and almost obsessive way of innovating towards maybe also maintenance. So that you allow people not just to say, I need to make something new, constantly saying, I need to make something new, but also saying, what I've made new also needs continuous maintaining with the external side around it, so it still keeps working in a meaningful way. So that maintenance is interesting. Maybe one final example there is, you know, I have no idea how many people are working for X now, for the you know, social media platform X, formerly known as Twitter. But there's a few thousand people that are working there. Then you compare that to Mastodon. Mastodon has 3 people working. One of them is paid. And you know, from an external perspective, you know, their service is equivalent. You know, they're offering a social media service that is based on the number of characters that you can push out on a platform. Of course, Mastodon has other features that provide privacy, and that has some other issues that you can't find people. Finding people is difficult, and so on. But they need to maintain it with 3 people and have an equivalent service that can compete with X in some way or another. You know, when Elon took over X, there were millions of users actually going from X to Mastodon, but maybe didn't find the same user experience or the same support. We need to also support this maintenance aspect of it, that these organizations can grow and provide a real alternative to these the large software offered services that are supported by billions of dollars or euros or other currencies in the world, and thousands of developers. It's a tough way to create alternatives and compete, but it is the only way, I think.
Yeah, I think well, we should be involved in writing a new funding tool for this, and especially for the supply chain security part, because it's now some talk about supply chain security standards that's coming up, and that's these are extremely important issues. I think
what's interesting about those calls is, Rob, you know, they're all under the SME instrument. You know, it's pointing again at, you know, a commercialization of solutions in a traditional sense. It doesn't, you know, it says open source, I think, but what could be interesting is more to have them aligned with the NGI values, and also looking at funding them as open source projects and not with the target of direct commercialization. And I think also, when you look at it, it also creates maybe a dual standard. There's an industry standard that might be, completely paid for and monetized. And then there might be actually standard that serves other types of communities, and there might not be aligning 100%. But hopefully people like Philippe will do a good job, and Mirko Ross, for example, as well, and others to drive this forward in a meaningful way.
Yeah. Well, like you, because I think if there's one thing that we've learned today is that it's people like you doing that, driving that forward, and especially having created this kind of situation in which I still think the main idea of NGI, which is enabling this ecology of the small, of the unfunded, which only happened in Europe. We must be honest also about that. It's not happening in the States. It's not happening basically anywhere else. It's happening here. And I think so. What you've shown so far, it's been a tremendous success, coming from the first CSA that we did, if I may say so myself.
I think I don't deserve as much credit as you're trying to give me right now. I have a feeling. I think there's a lot of people that were involved in it, and I have to also thank you, Rob, for actually coming to me and saying, there's this NGI thing. We should have a project there. I wouldn't have done that without you pushing me. So thanks a lot.
That's good to hear. Well, that's good to hear. Well, I think on this note, we've passed an hour, and so on this note, we will stop. And so I want to thank you again, Mirko, for all your great work. And I want to thank the NGI organizers for having us. And let's just keep up the good work.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. It was interesting talking about some memories.
It absolutely was. Yes.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Maybe it's time for some questions. Please feel free to use the chat to ask any questions you may have.
The only reason why we're doing the NGI is for the stickers. It's very important to get stickers, like an NL sticker or an NGI sticker.
I see some good comments, but I don't see any questions. I think.
Catalin, I hope I didn't ramble too much. I have no idea what I was talking about. So all of this has to come with a disclaimer, that I just enjoy talking to Rob. So yeah. I hope I didn't offend anybody during the conversation.
No,
I think Jorge, it will be made available, the conversation, right?
Yeah, sure.
The recording, it will be
on
NGI.eu.
Yeah.
So just as a disclaimer, European Commission does a fantastic job. Always has, always will. And Nelnet are the best in the world. I really like them to bits. OW2 as well, and my colleagues at Funding Box and Rob, of course, and Linknovate that I work with. No, I can't mention all, but maybe this disclaimer will be cut out at the end, anyways. Maintenance scheme. Yeah.
Mirko, one notion about the maintenance. Maybe you could say a little bit more about the maintenance before we stop.
Yeah. So the programs that we evaluate. So there's, of course, every project does it slightly differently when they have cascade funding. But what the minimum requirements are for cascade funding projects in general, and that's not always true, but in general, is that it has to have some innovation and it has to have some technology. So when somebody comes and says, I have already an open source project, it needs maintenance so it keeps working alongside the other developments that are moving forward. Like, there's a lot that Thunderbird has to do to be able to work with the other Mozilla framework around it. And that's a lot of maintenance work, maybe, refactoring or, cleaning up some code or maybe redesigning some sort of piece of code in the larger context. And those are not generally funded because they don't sound like innovation projects or research and innovation projects. And that's problematic. So it would be nice that maybe in a program like this, we could also say, you know what, we can provide some funding for some established open source projects that just need to have some operational maintenance side to it. And we often move around it, offering some sort of weird contracts to some projects, maybe not now in this NGI context, but I mean, in general, I've heard some things that are interesting, but maybe in the long run don't work. So we need to find a mechanism, I think, where the funding for some open source projects are not as sporadic. So I would call it that we need to combine it with a strategy of sustainability. So what do you want to achieve with what you're setting out? Is it just a hobby that you do when you enjoy yourself and have time for it? Or is it something that you take more serious and say, okay, this is actually becoming a pillar that will help maintain a critical, piece of infrastructure or something that we are relying on more specifically, and then seeing how maybe some of this can flow back into an economy for that person that creates this. I don't know. I don't have good solutions to it. I talked to some interesting people about it, like Melanie Rieberg has some interesting ideas on this. There have been some interesting ideas also in the wider scope, like the economy of the left, I think, or localized economies for goods and services, which might not apply in this context so well. But there are some ideas that are there. It's just we need to figure out how to explore them and how actually this could also work in a very capitalistic focused context. So that I think is interesting to explore as, maybe an NGI maintenance project or something like this could be interesting to look at.
Okay. Thank you, Xavi. Then I want to thank you again, Mirko. And I suggest we close this session. I think it's been an enjoyable one. So for us, thanks again. Thank you very much.
It's always therapy to talk. Thanks a lot, Rob, and thank you for everyone, and thanks Jorge and Katharina for organizing this.
Thank you very much, Mirko and Rob. Thank you.